So, welcome to the next edition of the Rare Business Podcast. With me today, I have Dr. Simon Moore, who is, no less, a chartered business psychologist, so prepare people, prepare, and also partner of Innovation Bubble. Hi, Simon, how you doing?
Hello, yeah, good.
Or should I call you Doctor?
No, Simon's fine, yeah. I'll be looking over my shoulder if you say doctor.
I was going to, should I lie down for this? I don't know.
I did a conference once and someone actually introduced me as a doctor. And I wasn't really actually concentrating at that point. And I kind of looked around and think, well, where's this? Is there another psychologist in? And then it was, oh, it's me.
Hello.
Yeah, there aren't many people I know with a PhD that, other than for banks, because you get quite a good rate.
Oh, right.
They don't tend to use the doctor for most things. Yeah.
Okay.
Of course, there are some with fairly big egos who insist on using doctor, but they're very few and far between.
Very good. So, Simon, for the benefit of our listeners and readers, and before we start rambling and going down some sort of rabbit holes and things, can you tell us a little bit about you and tell us a little bit about the work that you do across it, like Innovation Bubble?
Yeah, sure. So as you've sort of described, I'm a psychologist. I originally started, this is interesting. So I originally started my kind of consultancy career with dolphins and monkeys, which some people might say is not that far away from some people in business, but I kind of worked a lot with conservation kind of industry. So right. At one point I was actually working with Castro's government in Cuba with dolphins, which is like,
cool. You weren't training them to put limpet mines on American ships?
No, to take them off.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah. No, one of the things that, was going on in Cuba at the time, they were really, really actually into their conservationism. Yeah. So I went over there and started, and it was all around, the behavioural patterns of these kind of animals. And then from there, I kind of jumped over just sort of purely by fluke with someone who actually came over on a holiday over there from Microsoft and said, oh, some of the stuff you're doing would be really interesting to look at in terms of business. And so I kind of, gave him a funny look. My eyebrows went up. But I went with it, and yeah, sort of haven't looked back since, really. So, and I've kind of, I suppose, I don't know, a bit like a butterfly in a cat, kind of, changing all the time. And now it ended up very much within the kind of, I suppose, the customer kind of experience, kind of internal engagement kind of area. So at the moment, we use the psychology to look at or try and unpick, the kind of real psychological behavioral reasons that influence things like purchase, engagement, loyalty, and that kind of stuff. And these are the sort of things you're not generally going to actually unpick successfully through sort of traditional stuff like surveys and, interviews and stuff, because, people are their own PR agents. They will manage what they kind of tell you in terms of their egos. And, a lot of the time they're not even aware. Mm-hmm. And how many times, I've done it, how many times have you been halfway through a sentence and you're thinking, why am I saying this to this person at this time? So, we're not always in control of our brains. Yeah. And, that's what we like to get involved in, isn't like, how can we help clients kind of pin down more of the real behind the scenes reasons? And they're usually the things that are the most important that are going to drive action. It's not this kind of, look at Brexit, look at Trump. All this is very rationalised, kind of like, yeah, he's not going to get in and we're not going to come out of Europe, and look what happened. And everyone then scratched their heads and like, whoa, but all the polls and surveys said that it wouldn't happen. Yeah. But that's my world. It's like, yeah, well, we don't listen to that kind of stuff because you've not asked the right questions and done it in the right way.
Right. Perfect. So this is, we've been hearing lots about, related to sort of some of the political stuff, but also related to the business kind of world as well. We've been hearing a lot about the role of emotions in kind of business, and particularly in things like, service and experience and so on and so forth. What's your view on, I guess, a lot of the talk around emotions and things, and what do you think kind of companies should be doing more and or less of? Because I think there's a lot of kind of ideas around kind of we should be measuring emotions and so on and so forth, but what's your view on all of this?
Yeah, as a psychologist, I find it really interesting that this kind of word is now kind of cropped up in this area because, emotions are part of our behavior, so 70-80% of any decisions you make are emotionally underpinned. So we like to think we're very rational, but actually it's the emotions that drive our kind of action.
Yeah.
So for people to start talking about it is as though they've just discovered, emotions, this is interesting. In actual fact, emotions have been around since, humans have been around. So, and we know that emotions are quite important in some animal behavior as well. So as a psychologist, it's like, yeah, duh, we've been there, we know that. Why are you suddenly so kind of like into this? Because it's like, it is a key cornerstone of behavior. So if I put a positive slant on it, I suppose it's good now that people are recognizing that emotions are really, really pivotal in this area. And I think, the whole how it squares with things like, you hear big data. The big data people want to measure emotions. And my feeling is good luck.
Yes.
Because, we've had 100 years of psychology as a science and they can't measure emotions yet.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's like, how are you as a data kind of analyst going to do it? Because I'm sure there's thousands of psychologists who'd be really interested in how you can do that. But having said that, we shouldn't underestimate, the influence of emotions. And my take on it is we might not be able to measure them purely, so we might be able to give them a weighting of like on a scale of 10, so like how pleased are you, an 8, a 9 or a 10, and in my sense it's like, well, what does it matter?
Sure.
What's the difference between an 8 and a 9 and a 10 anyway? So this, for like the net promoter score, for example, always baffles me, because it's kind of like, oh, we want to get an 8, we're a 7, we want to get an 8, and it's like, yeah, but what does that mean?
Yeah.
Surely all you want to do is just be more positive to people. Well, numbers are irrelevant. It's like, so for me, my advice to any brand is just be more pleasant. If you can increase your pleasant score,
yes, then
you're going to be successful, because people want to carry on dealing with it. It's like our friends, isn't it? People who are pleasant to us, we like, and we have a good relationship with.
Yes.
With people who are unpleasant or neutral, we're pretty indifferent to. It's not rocket science.
Yeah, and I mean it's it's pretty straightforward. I think there's this I guess there's a whole kind of we could probably spend hours on this, but there's a whole contextual, subjective, cultural, social, anthropological, experiential sort of element to the emotional state that people have, which is like you look at it and go, well, how could you measure it?
Yeah, and I think what a lot of organisations around are struggling with at the moment is they're not asking the right questions to actually kind of, discover what emotions are important here. Yeah. Because people will tell you one thing, but, so for example, I'll give you a good example from some pharma work we've done.
Okay.
So we worked with a lot of consultants. I think this particular project was with cardiologists. And they will say, for example, that they won't buy or use a drug because it's expensive. Yeah. And that's a really good throwaway defense mechanism, because no one can argue with that. Yeah. And it doesn't threaten our ego, because you're like, oh, fair enough, okay, so it's expensive. And a lot of consumers will say that. Oh, I'm not buying it or engaging because it's expensive. But once you unpick that and go below the surface, what you actually find is it's got nothing to do with expense. Right. So for these cardiologists, for example, the reason that they weren't engaging with the product was the fact that their patients they'd labelled as almost like couch potatoes. Right. So these were patients who were inactive. So even if I use the best product in the world, these people are still going to sit on their couches. So as a problem solver, I can't demonstrate that I've solved that problem, because I can cure that person's, out of breath and that they get chest pain. But even by using that product, they're still going to sit on their couch and watch TV all day. So they're not going to demonstrate to the whole world, I've suddenly got them off the couch and they're now jogging around the park. See what I mean?
I think, yes.
But I'm not going to admit that to you, because I don't want to let everyone know that my ego is the real reason that I'm kind of not making this decision. Right. So, this is why I'm a little bit kind of, surprised that people rely so much on these kind of conscious-based surveys and interviews. There's nothing wrong with them, but we shouldn't be basing everything on a survey of 10,000 people. Right. Because at the end of the day, the surveys in themselves are just shocking, the things they ask. But they're very much based in this kind of rational world. Uh-huh. And as I've already said, that behavioural action is underpinned by the non-rational, the emotional parts that people are not very good at kind of expressing or describing, or even being aware about what they are experiencing at the moment in time. So there's that kind of disconnect between the two, and I feel that there's a lot more work that brands can do to get into this space. It's not that, all right, so we can't measure it, but we can still work with it.
Right.
We can still kind of find out what emotions are here and which ones are irrelevant.
Okay.
We don't have to measure them, but that's really important. So if I find out that excitement is not what kind of consumers want, and how many brands say, well, we want to be an exciting brand?
Too many.
Yeah, and as a psychologist, I would be, whoa, hang on, you're always like a drug pusher here.
Yes.
Because
oh, don't get me started on that. There's so much kind of going on with behavioural design.
Yeah, well, it's kind of like, you're just giving them hits
Yeah.
and highs, and it's like, then you've got to create the next high, so you've got to do something even more fantastic next time. No, don't do that. That's just dangerous for your brand. Be pleasant.
Yeah.
Because that's a positive thing. People, their expectation is low, but it's still positive, so you can work with pleasant. There's less resources that needed. So it's kind of, for me, it's not about measuring emotions. It's sifting through and actually finding out which emotions are relevant and which are not, for example. Right. And that depends on whether you're dealing with loyalty, whether you're dealing with credibility, whether you're dealing with value. There are different emotional systems at play with different consumers in those areas.
Yeah, and I guess also at the same time, it's like people have actually got to really kind of like get really very honest about the emotions that they kind of want to deal with and or that they're dealing with, and the ones that relate to their kind of brand, and actually be able to strip all their egos out of it.
Yeah, and you'll find that organisations will shy away from emotions because they don't understand them.
Yeah.
Or they have a very superficial, which is fine. So my analogy is, and I think you've probably heard me say this before, is that, if you've got a problem with your teeth, you go to a dentist.
Yeah.
If you've got a problem with the car, you go to, the garage.
Yeah.
Or a mechanic. So, if you've got a problem with your customers' behaviour or your employees' behaviour, why the hell are you not talking to a psychologist?
Right.
Why are you talking to insight people, or why are you talking to market research people? They're not psychologists.
Okay.
They literally just do a pulse check on you, and that's it, and go, 53% of people think this. They like yellow.
And so,
my question is, well, why do they like yellow? It's the why question that's the really essential part we need to unpick.
Right. So does that mean that I guess there's a lot of kind of companies that are going into trying to design kind of the experiences and so on and so forth, but they're trying to drive towards achieving certain emotions. So are you basically saying, well, actually, no, that's just a fool's errand, and actually you should just be a bit more mindful of the things that are the emotions that are involved in the whole experience? And
yeah, so my feeling is that if you can be aware what emotions are important,
yeah,
you can play those up in your comms and your product strategy or your positioning.
Right.
Yeah. If you try and create artificial emotions, they're just, intuitively people are not going to engage with them because that's not what they intuitively feel.
Yes.
So if I'm trying to persuade you to like a film, that's going to be less like than if you intuitively like one of the actors or you like that kind of genre of film.
Right.
There's some basis of liking there already. Okay. I'm not artificially kind of brainwashing you. And this is why one of my bugbears about behavioural change and nudge theory.
Yeah.
That behaviour is really important, but there's a really negative, for me, that I think there's a really negative kind of employment or deployment of behavioural change for many firms is the fact that they are trying to get the consumer to change.
Yes.
Yeah. So think about trying to persuade a friend or a partner to do something. It's quite tricky and it can go badly wrong.
Sure.
So actually, what you should be using behavioural kind of insights and change for is to understand what it is that the customer intuitively wants or needs.
Yes.
And then you change accordingly to meet that. And whether that's your communication strategy, whether that's your kind of positioning, we can do it, but don't make them change, because that really could backfire in your face.
Yeah, so it's actually kind of that focus on kind of what the customer actually wants to achieve, or the action that they want to do. And what is the outcome they want to get to, and then figure out how to help them do that.
Yeah, and I mean, and a really good example is like websites. I mean, a number of brands and organisations that do these all singing, all dancing websites,
Yeah.
and they look amazing. But the problem with it is that our brain can only cope with 4 things at one time.
4 things?
4 things.
Oh,
Well, if
that's better
like
than I thought it was. I thought it was 3.
Well, probably more like me, it'd be 2. But anyway,
Right.
So in general, 4 things. So you've got how many hundreds of things have you got on a website when you land? There's just all things going on.
Right.
So the problem is that what we do is we rely on our intuitive emotional systems to screen through what is relevant and not relevant to us. And it might not be what we built. So why is it then, for example, a lot of people will build products and people will use them not as you intended?
Yes.
Because that's their emotional system going in, going, good, bad, negative, not negative, risky, opportunity. You know, there's really kind of like some basic kind of non-conscious processes going on here. So we start screening through stuff. And that's the same for the website. We pick up 4 things very quickly, what we gain from that website, and it might not be what you intended it to be.
Right.
This is why we had to be really careful with our comms.
But then that's kind of that's almost like a perennial challenge for not just firms but for people generally. Is this idea that we talk about we want simplicity or want to achieve simplicity, but yet we have an inherent bias towards complexity because we like adding things and not taking things away.
Yeah, and also we've got a brain for a reason because it likes to make choices.
Yeah.
Okay. So I hate it when people say, "Oh, we want frictionless," or "We want to make life easy." It's like to some extent that's good, but don't go all the way because so all of us have an ego and identity, and the way that our brain kind of operates with that is that it needs to make choices for us to understand who we are and our self-worth.
Sure.
If we want to make decisions for us all the time, we have no sense of what we're capable of or not capable of, and we don't get any like pat on our back because we solved something.
Yeah.
So, making it functionless and frictionless and automated is quite risky.
Yeah.
And trying to tell that to organizations, is interesting because their response is, "Oh, but we want frictionless."
Well, yeah, I mean, this is something I've been sort of, rummaging around with a couple of people around this whole sort of, the whole kind of frictionless experience. I'm like going, but I'm not sure about it because actually there's something quite valuable, kind of real kinesthetic thing about handing something over.
Yeah.
Like, for example, the latest kind of Amazon shopping experience where it's like you just kind of walk in, it logs, you're logged in, it knows that you're there, you're all logged into your account, you go and pick up some stuff, it's all RFID chipped and things, you put it in a basket, you walk out and it automatically debits your account. And I look at that and go, that's just a glorified vending machine.
Yeah, and think about the experience there. The experience is, we like challenges. We like to solve problems. So if you go in for Amazon or wherever, you might go in to buy some new pair of jeans. If you walk in the shop and the assistant immediately walks over and you go, "Here you go." You're like, "Oh, well, where's the experience there? I don't feel any self-worth because I didn't go out and like locate the jeans and go through the pain of trying them on, and I feel really good." So there is value in all the time investment we put.
And so there's another thing, I don't know if you've ever heard of this book before, but there's you'll have heard of the author, E.M. Forster.
Yeah.
And do you know the short story that E.M. Forster did called The Machine Stops?
I've heard of it.
Right.
The only book I've read of his is The Passage to India, I think.
Right. Well, this is kind of his venture into sci-fi.
Right.
And The Machine Stops was written in 1909. And what's interesting, there's this part of the story where most of the kind of human race sort of like orbits the Earth in these kind of airship kind of type blimps. I think that's kind of it, right. And actually everything gets done for them and they communicate via these little kind of like portal sort of things, which feels a bit like Skype video calls.
Okay.
And they've got access to this all-seeing kind of thing where they ask it questions and it gives them the answers. And they spend their time just musing around trying to come up with creative answers to existing kind of questions, but effectively all they're doing is just rehashing everything else that's ever been done, as it were. But they don't actually produce anything. Yeah. And so there's a mother that kind of lives in this, and it's a bit like supported living, because everything is done, everything's automated, etc., and protected, etc., etc. But her son rejects it and then decides to actually go and live on the surface with a whole other group of kind of people, because she says, oh no, because it's such a harsh environment, it's very dangerous. And he says, but see, that's the point. I want the visceral experience. I want to, life is about living, not just having everything done for you.
Yeah.
And I thought it was just a really interesting point, and particularly when it was written 1909.
Yeah, no, it's amazing, isn't it, how some people can look forward but I agree. It's kind of like when we talk about a value and we talk about effort, it's like, think about your own life, that if you put effort into something, it's more valuable to you.
Sure.
Yeah, so like, relationships or whatever it might be, it's like when a relationship ends that you put a lot of effort to, it's really emotionally kind of like end of the world, isn't it? Whereas if you're not that bothered and not put a lot of effort in, you're like, okay, whatever. Next.
Yeah, well, but there is a flip side to that as well. It's like if you put so much effort into a relationship and it feels like hard work.
Yeah.
Then it's just like going.
Exactly. So there's this elastic concept, but what I really don't like is it when organisations say we really have to make things as simple as possible.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, I think the word you're looking for is streamline.
Right.
It's not simplicity. It's like, how can you be more relevant? And how do you not give stuff that the consumer doesn't want or need? That's what you're looking for, not making it easy. Mm-hmm. Because none of us want really life to be on a plate and made that easy. We'll tell you that we do. But actually, that's quite sterile and boring and non-engaging when it is, because we don't get that sense of, you know what, I achieved that.
Yeah.
It was me who got that. You didn't just hand it to me.
Yes.
So I kind of have a bit of a problem in that sense of, customer experience, design. They're very much leaning into this ease and frictionless space. And it's like, I think we need to be a bit careful here.
Yes. No, I'd agree. I think that, there's you can overshoot it.
Yeah.
But anyway, I'll tell you what, Simon. Let me ask you kind of this: is that give me a couple of examples, or kind of make it real for us in terms of kind of the work that you do. Can you give us, in order to do that, can you give us a couple of examples of like things problems that firms or brands have had, and how you've helped them sort of solve them or address them or look at them differently?
Yeah.
And the sort of results they're kind of seeing, because then it makes real where, sort of, if you're a spanner, let's say, forgive the analogy, like where can you put the spanner as a psychologist, and where can we add value kind of with your type of insight, as it were?
Yeah. Okay, so as a psychologist, we can work anywhere, so which doesn't help people, but we can work in outward, so we can work at comms, marketing,
right,
credibility, purchase, whatever it might be, or you can do it internally. So you could look at things like innovation or engagement, and so I'll give you a couple of examples. So big international kind of global bank had kind of spent over £1 million on their new kind of like brand comms. Mm-hmm. And their assumption from their market research was, consumers and business people don't trust banks.
Right.
So what we need to do then is get them to trust us.
Right.
Okay. So all our comms must be about, you can trust us. You can trust us. Don't look into my eyes around that
yes.
kind of stuff. Yeah. So did it all. Spent quite a lot of money on all this. And the most significant statistic after a year of analysis was churn rates went up by 7%. And they were like, oh, my goodness, this can't be true. What's happening? All our market research said that it was all about trust.
Yeah.
So get a phone call. Could you come and help? Because we're not sure we've got this right.
Yeah.
So we're like, yeah, we can come and help. So cut a long story short, when we sort of deployed and did our stuff, so we do qual and we do quant. So we do qual stuff. We do, some sort of psychology interviews and stuff like that to kind of get to the grips of, are these assumptions correct?
Yeah.
And by doing that, we're able to look at non-verbal responses as well. And they give you clues about, we don't believe that this person's actually sort of aware or actually telling the truth. Not that they're trying to lie to us, but, it's a throwaway comment. There's something deeper going on here.
Yes.
And then so we've got a number of engines that we built that look at the difference between sort of truth and just sort of people regurgitating information. Mm-hmm. And what we found was that it was trust, but the main issue and the main need of the actual consumer was intuitively trust the bank because banks are banks. You don't just suddenly make a bank up.
Yeah.
They're there for a reason, so they must have experience. So that's not a problem.
Mm-hmm.
Which obviously ran counter to the assumption of the bank.
Mm-hmm.
The main thing about trust is I don't trust myself in engaging with the bank. So I don't trust doing stuff online.
Right.
I don't trust doing the little app you've made for my phone because I don't trust myself that I'm doing it in the right way.
Right.
And I'm not going to tell you that though because I'll feel like I'm an idiot.
Yeah, I don't want to tell you that I think I'm stupid.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm not going to tell you that in an interview, and I'm not going to tell you that in a focus group. But we can strip that away if you use psychologists. They can dig around that and find that out. So as soon as we found that out, we changed all the comms. A year later, there was something like a 15% reduction in churn, so very significant turnaround.
Yeah.
But we had a 12% increase in new market growth as well, because it was like, oh, you're talking our language now.
Yes.
No other bank is doing this. So that's really interesting. So so that's one.
Okay.
So completely opposite area of the sort of same dimension. What else could we do? We could do. I can. Thomas Cook. We did a global project for them. They were quite smart actually. They got to a position where they thought they were going to go and do some comms and advertising and positioning around sort of their products, and they were going to. Their tagline was, holidays are about going on adventure and excitement, and of course everyone else is saying that, aren't they, in the category as well?
Right.
We were a bit like, is that really benefiting Thomas Cook, or is that just benefiting the category? Where's the differentiation here? What? They're all your competitors are saying the same thing, but are we really sure that's what people want to do when they want to go on holiday?
Right.
So we did a global study. I think there were like 5 or 6 kind of different countries around the world. We looked at the consumers about what they want on holiday. And we found out that actually, rather than going away and being someone else, which is a lot of what holidays sort of suggest you can do.
Right.
Intuitively, actually, we want to go away and be ourselves. So if I want a cocktail at 9 o'clock in the morning, I'll have it.
Yes.
I can't do that at home because I've got all these sort of like expectations about who I am in my community and in my family and in my work. But take all that expectation away. When I'm in a different environment, I can do what I want and be me. I can be me, more like me. The other main thing we found were 2 other really interesting things. So one was that actually hygiene factors were more impactful on repurchase than things like adventure, beaches, all that kind of, and being somewhere in a luxury location.
And what do you mean by hygiene factors?
Right. So what we found, for example, that the German market, one of the main predictors there were the actual the problem-solving ability of the receptionist in the hotel. That was by far the main predicting factor of whether they had a good holiday or not.
Wow.
Yeah, because obviously pragmatic. It's like this is a hub of information. What's in the local area? What do I need to know? Not need to know. Can you solve my problems very quickly? If you can, then I can relax and enjoy myself again.
Yes.
If I can't, if I have to keep coming back to you and I don't feel you're solving it, you're actually upping my anxiety.
Wow. Okay.
UK people, it was the front runners were a tie between pillows.
Okay.
How comfortable were the pillows?
Yeah.
Because I get a good night's sleep.
And
how fluffy were the towels? And this all sounds really like sort of stupid, but on a non-conscious emotional level, these are really important for people when they're away because they offer security, they offer comfort.
Well, it's also kind of fulfilling expectations of what it's supposed to be.
So what we found is that people who actually rated their pillows and their towels more positively actually explored the areas that they were from sort of greater differences. So their circumference of sort of discovery was a lot greater than those people who weren't so happy with their pillows and towels and stuff. Really funny. So they would, so this has implications because it means that these people would actually buy sort of travel packages while they were there. Whereas the people who were not so happy with the hygiene stuff, the cleanliness of the room, pillows, towels, that kind of stuff, psychologically felt they had to remain closer to the hotel to keep solving all these problems.
Yeah, because they just didn't. They all sorts of anxieties come up. You think they're kind of there's going to be an earthquake and the hotel's going to collapse and.
Yeah, or what, have they solved those pillows? I need to be around to keep nudging them, for example.
Yeah.
Whereas the ones who are happy, they took more excursions. So obviously Thomas Cook were able to sort of sell more once they, and once they realised that, it was like, now we know what we need to do for our comms.
Yeah, and also operationally, I guess, as well.
Yeah, and then I suppose the other major factor we found was that they'd completely missed part of the journey. So they were really present as a brand when obviously in the buying process or the holiday selection process, and they were really present, from the airport onwards.
Yeah.
But the main part they weren't at, where you're most positive emotionally,
when
is
you
the
come back.
No, it's the expectation of a holiday.
Okay.
So because your mind can, you could have a really, really kind of like stressful job, but your mind like, phew, I've booked a holiday, I'm really looking forward to it. So your mind starts to play a movie in your head about what you're going to do on a holiday. So your expectation creates delight, doesn't it? It creates like all these pleasant emotions.
Right.
The thing is that Thomas Cook, or I think a lot of brands are kind of guilty of this. You're not there, but kind of managing these emotions or being associated with the pleasant emotions.
Right.
So what we kind of did with them is we kind of redesigned stuff to make sure that their brand name was actually kind of there and present at the kind of expectation stage.
Right. Okay. Cool. Fascinating.
So that's the kind of stuff we do. Yeah. It's gonna, but it could be. I think we suffer a little bit from the kind of kid in the sweet shop effect that we can deploy anywhere. And people go, whoa, this is really fascinating. We could do this stuff. What works better for us is what problem's keeping you awake.
Yeah.
And let's look at it from a different perspective. Let's look at it from a psychology perspective, because psychology is like a Tesco offer. It's like 2 for 1.
I think
I'm selling myself now, I know. But the fact is that not only can we find the truth, psychologists are trained to then do intervention. They're trained to then help you sort of intervene and then change and then do what do we need to change then in terms of comms or product design or service offering? What is it and how can we do that? How can we implement those changes? So how can we operationalize?
But here's the thing, kind of, Simon. I think that, we all know that there's truth and wisdom in this in the old saying is that you can lead a horse to water but you can't make it drink.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so if I was to say to you, in many ways, if you've got to prepare the ground in front of you to make people kind of like tune into the emotional aspect when it comes to things like kind of customer experience or service or whatever it might be, and to make them more aware of it or to take more account of it. I mean, what sort of advice would you be giving to entrepreneurs or execs or leaders and stuff to say, well, people have been talking about there's a big emotional sort of wave coming where people are trying to do that, but as a psychologist, to tune into that and to get the most, if you like, insight or impact or value kind of from that type of thing, is not to be led down the garden path, but to do X, Y, and Z. What would that X, Y, and Z advice be from you to them?
So working, for the past X number of years in this kind of space, what I found is, and what's benefited sort of brands and organizations the most is a little bit of investment on some kind of insight research,
right?
But not market research stuff,
right?
So some proper kind of, let's do some behavioural psychological kind of analysis on. It doesn't have to be expensive. It doesn't have to be days and weeks and months, but let's just do a reality check here before we start spending loads of money.
Right.
Our work has tended to result in not just kind of profit, but it's also, I think, one of the underestimated things is waste.
Right.
Budget waste. So we've been quite successful in actually managing kind of brands to not waste budget, which they can then reposition in another area, for example. And we can always, we can say, why are you spending 1.5 million? Actually, the problem's this: you only have to spend 0.5 million now, because all that other stuff was irrelevant.
Yeah.
So that's useful. So I think a little bit of an investment in this, and I know people go, oh, research and stuff, we know what the problem is, but the number of times I've had that conversation and they've gone down the road and then it's like, oh, the dial hasn't changed much.
Yeah, but then put that, I guess,
I'll get cheapish call to go, that thing you suggested, can we do it now?
But I think if I was going to say to you, kind of even prior to reaching out to somebody like yourself,
yeah,
is there a kind of a perspective or a mind shift requirement that says, don't look at it like this, look at it like this? Or if instead of just looking at that, why don't you also consider this as well, as a way of getting people to sort of almost be a bit more inclusive or holistic in their thinking?
Yeah, I think one of the sort of best ways of doing that is think about, anyone can think about their day-to-day lives.
Yeah.
Think about how many times have we made a decision, nothing to do with rationality, but it's been in another space.
Right.
Most of the stuff we do is about how it makes us feel. So we either do stuff that makes us feel good, or we do stuff that makes us kind of avoid stress and hurt.
Sure.
So if we can think about the world in that way, that helps people design stuff. It's not like, oh, it's all shiny and it can do this and do that. Yeah, but that's practical stuff.
Sure.
Yeah, so there's a really great example of a company we did some development work with, and they basically they thought they designed what was called sentiment analysis.
Yeah.
They had a system that they thought could measure sentiments. Mm-hmm. It's like neither here nor up. Whether that is the case or not, I'm not sure, but you can do that. But anyway, so they did it, and we said, okay, so as a brand, what do you offer your clients? Mm-hmm. And they say, oh, we offer them reports and assessments and da-da-da-da. And it's all, and like, yeah, emotionally, what do you offer your clients? And there was just a pause, and they were like, and they really struggled and thought, oh, yeah, I'm not quite, hang on, that's a really good question. So my advice to kind of, any would-be listener would be, what are the emotional benefits of your brand or organization? Don't forget the practical stuff.
Yeah.
What are you offering clients emotionally?
Great question.
And if you can, if you can answer that question, great. But really think about, is that true?
Sure.
And is that so? My example between excitement and pleased. Do you really want your audience to be excited, or would you rather they be pleased?
Very good.
For example.
So, thank you for that. That's brilliant. So, now I want to sort of kind of switch it around a little bit right now, because and do a slightly self-indulgent thing. So, I mean, I as you know, because we've spoken before, Simon, I published this book called How to Wow last year.
Yeah.
And what I've been doing in subsequent interviews and these kind of podcast interviews is asking people, it's like my own little bit of market research, as it were, is asking people for what their perspective is on what is wow service or wow experience and what it takes to deliver it. So I'd be interested to hear your perspective on that. Sure.
I mean, the very word wow, it almost like kind of alludes to a big sort of bang or a big event, doesn't it? Wow is one of those words that you even just saying it is quite kind of wow, it's like, oh yeah, sudden thing. So I think people can get a bit confused by this and think they've got to do something quite big and magical. And my view on this is that wow is not always this kind of big bang thing. I think that it's much more cumulative. Yes. So it's little things you do that almost like gel together into this kind of like snowball. Okay. That's what creates wow for me. Because what we know about stress, so people have obviously got stress the wrong way around. So when people think about stress, they think of things like, divorce, moving house. These are the things that really stress us and have the bad effects. And what we know from medical science and psychology is actually it's the little daily hassles like losing your keys, missing the bus. These are cumulative, and they actually have a really, really, really dreadful effect on your health. Right. Because they wear you down. So my stance is the opposite of that, thinking, well, if we can do little things that please people, overall you're creating a wow experience by, it's just sort of like creating this kind of rubber ball bundle that's just sort of forming together. Yeah. That is wow for me.
Perfect. And that so then brings me to my kind of last question, Simon, that I always kind of ask at the end of these ones, and the question is this. Is there anything that you would like to shamelessly plug?
Not shamelessly. I would think it's just a piece of advice really that is, given the fact we're talking about behaviour here, then, just as you would with a dentist or a mechanic, at least get some advice or have an initial conversation with, a consumer or business psychologist. You never know. It might well be that you're doing the right thing and they can tell you that you don't need me. And I've had those conversations many times where it's like, no, you don't need, carry on.
Yes.
But there are times when you're like, I have to literally suck air in through my teeth and go, you're doing what? That's just suicide. Why are you doing it that? And it actually has saved people. Probably, I know I've saved two businesses from bankruptcy. And then it's the other issue of it's not just about the money I can make you. It's how we can save you doing stuff you don't need to do. That for me is equally as important. So it's just have a conversation. Just be willing to have a conversation about it, I think.
Perfect. Simon, that's fascinating and interesting and useful, and just want to say thank you for sharing your time and your insights and everything else. And I'll make sure I get everything kind of linked up and edited up and let you know when this all going to goes kind of live. But just thanks very much for your time.
No, it's good. It's really interesting as well, and and I'm just hoping that more people, not just for us, but it's just chatting to the right people, because I think people go down, as you quite nicely sort of describe it, down sort of these rabbit holes.
Yeah.
And then get completely kind of paralyzed because they just don't know what to do next.
Indeed.
And it's kind of like, for people like you and myself, it's just have that conversation, because, I think they just think we're going to sell them stuff.
You're like going, the thing, and what's fascinating is that I always can tell people, it's like, I'm not interested in doing projects which are going to give me kind of like grief or a hard time.
Yeah, yeah. And I quite understand. I'm not interested in doing projects that are artificial.
Yeah.
In fact, I don't need to do it.
No, I don't want to do it.
If you want to give your money away, give it to someone else. But there's nothing here for me to do, and I wouldn't be engaged by it because it's literally just going through the motions. There's nothing.
And you wouldn't do
You're doing it in the right way already, so just carry on.
And you wouldn't do it. You wouldn't do a good job, and your heart wouldn't be in it, and so on and so forth.
Exactly.
Anyway,
cool. All right. Well, look, good. Thanks for that, and have a lovely weekend.
And thank you.